Our speaker tonight is Curtis Bowers. You know, when I was growing up, there was a television program put on by a Catholic priest, and it was something about it's better to light one little candle than to curse the darkness. How many people remember that? Quite a few of you. Well, you know, I was thinking about that. That's about where we are today. There's a lot of darkness, and you could do a lot of cursing, but that doesn't really answer the problem. I think we need to light candles. It's like, you know, we have a big kettle of water here, and like the United States is a big kettle of water, and it's cold, and it's not doing anything, and we need to get it boiling. We need to get the American people on fire and boiling. And you can put one candle underneath that pot of water, it's not going to do very much. But if you get 10,000 candles underneath that pot of water, it will eventually start to boil. And, you know, if I have a candle and I come over here and give it to Colonel Clayton, and he gives it to Eileen, he gives it to Rick, and for the next thing you know, the whole room is filled with candles. And we just pass that light on. It doesn't take anything from me to give him a light. It doesn't take anything from me. But he's got a light, and then he can light Rick and Eileen, and they can all get lit. And you say, get lit. Okay, the thing is, we need to stir people up. Now, how can you light a candle and get America stood up? This man, Curtis Bowers, has written a video that is a candle lighter, okay? When people see this video, they're transformed, and they become on fire activists for the conservative cause. That's how many people have seen his video? Wow, almost all. We showed it here, what has it been, 6-9 months ago? And when we got through, everybody stood up and clapped. I couldn't imagine. What are they clapping about? But it's a wonderful video. And then they started saying, we want a copy of that. We want a copy. We never even dreamed. We didn't have any copies. But we got 100 and then another 100. How many 100 did we get? 300, 400? And everybody that sees that video, they are on fire for the cause, okay? We're not here to have a good time or to, I don't know, I don't want to insult anybody, but we're not here to have a good time. We're here to do a job for the cause of Christ and for the cause of America and freedom and our Constitution and all of that. We're here for a reason. And when we show these videos, it really stirs people up, and then they take that fire that we give them and they go and fire up somebody else.
Well, what Dr. Simon and AFA and the different groups represented here are doing in this area is making a huge, huge difference. And I'm going to have some of my family come up here right now. My wife, Lauren, and then I have Carver, Christian, and Crockett, and then two of my daughters, Carolina and Cassidy. We've got a few younger ones staying with one of my sons in the RV. But we're going to sing a few songs for you before we get going. And
to Jesus every day I find my heart is closer drawn. He's fairer than the glory of the golden purple dawn. He's all my fancy pictures in his fairest dreams and more. Each day he grows still sweeter than he was the day before. The half cannot be fancied this side the golden shore. Oh, there he'll be still sweeter than he ever was before. His glory broke upon me when I saw him from afar. He's fairer than the lily, brighter than the morning star. He fills and satisfies my longing spirit o'er and o'er. Each day he grows still sweeter than he was the day before. The half cannot be fancied this side the golden shore. sweeter than he ever was before. My heart is sometimes heavy, but he comes with sweet relief. He folds me to his bosom when I droop with blinding grief. I love the Christ who all my burdens in his body bore. Each day he grows still sweeter than he was the day before. The half cannot be fancied this side the golden shore. Oh, there he'll be still sweeter than he ever was before. Oh, there he'll be still sweeter than he ever was before. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. The Bible stands like a rock undone amid the raging storms of time. Its pages burn with the truth eternal, and they glow with the lights of light. The Bible stands so the hills may tumble, it will firmly stand when the earth shall crumble. I will plant my feet on its firm foundation, for the Bible stands. The Bible stands like a mountain towering far above the works of man. It's been truth by none ever was refuted, and destroyed it they never can. The Bible stands, and it will forever when the world has passed away. By inspiration it has been given, all its precepts I will obey. The Bible stands so the hills may tumble, it will firmly stand when the earth shall crumble. I will plant my feet on its firm foundation, for the Bible stands. The Bible stands, every test we give it, for its author is divine. By grace alone I expect to live it and to prove it and make it mine. The Bible stands so the hills may tumble, it will firmly stand when the earth shall crumble. I will plant my feet on its firm foundation, for the Bible stands. Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before.
It's a story about this blacksmith, and he hears that they're coming after George Washington to kill him, so he leaves immediately his shop and goes to fight to save George Washington. And when he comes home, he finds his wife and child have been killed by the British soldiers. And so he takes his blacksmith hammer and he heads out to fight the British. And it's a story about these men that come upon him. They find him dead, but there's dead British troops all around him. And it's one they used to sing a couple hundred years ago here in America.
For Washington and all his gallant men, and one for the girl that once was mine. Make it one for the darling boy I'll never see again. And don't forget the blacksmith of Brandywine. As we rode down to Brandywine, there was a sight to see. A giant of a man with a hammer in his hand beneath the old oak tree. And scattered all around him there in fatal disarray, a score of men who will never fight again nor travel on the king's highway. So we dug his grave and covered him more, and sadly went adieu, and passed our day riding on our way till we met with a musketeer, who told us of a story of a brave and angry man. One day he took the British enemy with a hammer in his hand. Make it one for Washington and all his gallant men, and one for the girl that once was mine. Make it one for the darling boy I'll never see again. And don't forget the blacksmith of Brandywine. There lived a man in Chestertown, away from the cannon's roar, a man, her mother's wife and child, no man could ever love more. One day he heard a Tory plot to waylay Washington. So he left his home and family alone to the heated run. When his errand done, he journeyed home, and sorrow there he found. By British gun, his wife and son were still on the cold hard ground. So the Plasmans grabbed his heavy sledge and gave a practice swing. They say that on the line of Brandywine, he could hear his hammer ring. Make it one for Washington and all his gallant men, and one for the girl that once was mine. Make it one for the darling boy I'll never see again, and don't forget the blacksmith of Brandywine. Make it one for Washington and all his gallant men, and one for the girl that once was mine. Make it one for the darling boy I'll never see again, and don't forget the blacksmith of Brandywine.
Just hearing those type of songs, they remind us of the great sacrifices that have been made for us to sit here tonight. Do you understand that? I don't think we think about those things near enough. I don't think we think about the hundreds of thousands of boys that are buried all over this world. So we can go to church wherever we'd like to. We can raise our children the way we think is right. We can use the talents God has given us. I made agenda because I saw, as many of you have, our country was just changing dramatically. It was a different world than from where I even grew up in the 60s and 70s as a child. And it seems to be continuing to go in the wrong direction and faster every year that goes by. Most of you, I think, have seen the movie, so you know a lot of why I made the film and stuff. But I think two of the main things that really motivated me to do this is, one, I really thought God wanted me to do this and make a film. Now, you have to be pretty motivated to quit your job when you have 9 children and take your savings and make a film when you've never made a film before. But I really felt it was what God wanted us to do. We homeschool our children, so it became a family project. It took us almost 2 years full-time to make this film, but we felt it was what we were supposed to be doing. But the other part of the puzzle that really drove me to action was when I read, as many of you are familiar with, Cleon Skousen's book, The Naked Communist, that lists out the 45 current communist goals from 1958. Okay? I'm just going to share a couple of those with you, and some of you might be familiar with them, but these are sobering if you really think about the America of 1958 and then where we are today in 2012. Goal 17 said, get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism, soften the curriculum, and get control of teachers' associations. They've done it all. Completely. But in 1958, that was a radical goal that probably appeared to most people when they read that book, that'll never happen in America. Do you realize just last year, the NEA, the National Education Association, passed a resolution to set aside October 1st to be the day that all of our public schools throughout America celebrated Chairman Mao's successful revolution in China. That passed through the NEA's committee. That's how radical the people we are dealing with are. For some of you younger people that may not know, Chairman Mao is estimated to have slaughtered between 50 and 60 million of his own people in that wonderful communist revolution we're going to be celebrating throughout our public schools. 10 times what Hitler did. That's how radical they are. Do you know, in a survey, I believe it was just last year in our public schools, of seniors, so it's the kids that have made it through, they made it to their senior year, they haven't dropped out yet or whatever, 36% of our seniors did not know where the government gets its money to spend on programs and things. 36% of them. And you wonder why they're for government programs, government doing whatever, pay off our loans, pay off our stuff, whatever, because they don't even know where the money comes from. They don't understand that's our money. The government is taking from us by force and then giving it and sharing it with whoever they choose. Goal 24, eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Of course, most of you would say, well, yeah, that's what the Supreme Court decided. Yeah, but in 1958, it wasn't protected under that same Constitution. Goal 25, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. I think as I read through these goals the very first time, I'll never forget it. Because I don't think I've ever been so stunned in all my life to see how specific these things were. But not only how specific they were, how right in line they were with us as Christians. We agree 100%. You promote pornography and obscenity in society, it's going to just rot it from the inside out. It's going to fall apart. They're just wanting to do that to have it fall apart, and we're trying to say, hey, get that pornography out of our stores, get that stuff away from our children. It'll wreck us. But they could see so clearly that the moral foundation of America was our greatness, even though most Americans don't see that. They think, oh, if homosexuals want to get married, or if you want to do, that doesn't affect anybody else. Mind your own business. It totally affects everybody else. It always does. Pornography has destroyed more marriages in America than anything else. In a recent survey, 40% of pastors in America said internet pornography is a constant struggle. That's how much influence pornography has had on our society. The entire culture is pornographic. Billboard signs, the way most ladies dress nowadays, you can't go anywhere without, seeing things you shouldn't be seeing. Just the covers, you go to any grocery store here in town, and just the covers of the magazines right there at Walmart or wherever, those would have been considered X-rated in the 1950s. It would have been against the law just to sell what's on the cover, those pictures. Goal 26, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Isn't that exactly how it's being promoted? I mean, it's not just, they used to say, oh, we just be tolerant of us, leave us alone, let us do our own thing, which we did. We said, whatever you want to do in your home, that's your business. We're not in your homes, but we don't want to hear about it. We don't want you telling our children about it. But of course, that wasn't good enough. Once they got that level, then it's, if you are not actively promoting and pushing their agenda, you are their enemy. I mean, it's no longer as neutral ground. If you're neutral ground, they're going to destroy you, especially if you're in public office. Goal 27, and I think this one has had probably more effect than anything else. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible. They knew from the very beginning that their number one enemy was the conservative Christians in America. And they realized that no matter how much they battled us, we would not back down. Why? Because we have a book of truth that tells us these principles. They're straight from God, so we're not going to sway because of some fancy argument. So they knew, hey, if we can get in those churches and push them to the left, get them sidetracked with all this social stuff instead of the gospel of Jesus Christ, get them busy doing do-gooder stuff, but just credit that Bible, get that Bible away from them where they don't have a book of absolutes, then we don't mind if they exist. We'll try to even capture that movement and use it to push forward our agenda, which they have done incredibly well and been very successful at that. Do you know that today over 80% of evangelical seminaries in America, those are the ones to train our pastors, over 80% of them do not believe the Bible is the inerrant word of God. That's how successful they have been. Over 80% do not believe the Bible is God's word. They feel that it's filled with errors. It's a good book, good stories, but it's filled with errors. And so, of course, that's why you have people, the pastors preaching like you do. If you don't believe it's all true, then you're going to just kind of get sidetracked on other things. Goal number 28. And this one, I think, kind of put me over the top when I was reading through this list. When I hit 28, I realized, you know what, I've got to make a film on this. Goal number 28 was eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the ground that it violates the principles of separation of church and state. We say, oh yeah, that's what happened. Yeah? But it didn't happen until 4 years later. And in 1962, when the Supreme Court took prayer out of our public schools, it was the first case in American history no precedents were given for their decision. They normally say because of this case, and this case, that's why we're deciding this. But when asked, are you taking prayer out of the public schools? They said yes. They said, what do you base that on? They said, we base it on the fact that it violates the principles of separation of church and state. Almost word for word what that goal had said 4 years earlier. And my mind said, you know what? You can't have a list of goals this specific. That are radical goals, seem very unlikely to ever be accomplished in this country, and accomplish them all unless you have tremendous influence. And that's when I started to realize something's going on here. You can't do this kind of stuff. It can't happen by accident. And so that's why I started to figure out how have they done this? And why has this happened? And I think the two biggest reasons are, one, what I already said, the churches. 50, 60 years ago, if you were pushing pornography in a little town or a city or whatever, you would have had every pastor in town of every denomination standing out there saying, you will not put that in our stores, period. We don't care. This is war. You will not violate our children's purity with that garbage. And guess who was standing right behind the pastors? Their entire congregation. All the people and groups and stuff my film talks about, they're almost meaningless in a way. It doesn't matter who. There's always been evil men wanting to do evil. They hate what is good and right and true, and they will do anything to destroy it. But up until the 50s and 60s, pastors in America just simply would not let those evil men do what they wanted to do. And so they couldn't do it. They had to be hiding in the shadows. They had to be back in the closets, staying away, because they realized that was not accepted. They would not be able to do what they wanted to do. But when the church started pulling out of everything, those people came out and said, okay, we'll take control of the schools if you want us to. We'll take control of Hollywood if you want us to. Do you realize up until the early 1960s, every single Hollywood film that was allowed to be showed at theaters had to be reviewed by the Protestant Film Office. And what was that? That is a board of pastors that have to watch through the film, and they had a whole list of criteria. One is your moral character cannot be any less when you leave the theater than when you came in. You cannot have any act of sin in a movie that doesn't show the consequences being reaped for that action, period. Or it cannot be shown in theaters across America. That was up until the early 1960s. And we just closed the office. Oh, I guess we don't, the Bible maybe is a little too stuffy for people. And we closed that office. We pulled out. So they came up with the rating system, which then gave them carte blanche to make things as filthy as they wanted, because they could say, oh, it's rated R or it's rated X, and so people know what they're getting, so we can do whatever we want then. It's because we just pulled out. We didn't truly believe the Bible does have the answer for everything. It truly is God's word that is absolute. The second reason what has happened is because we simply did not pass down to our children and grandchildren what we believed and what we had. The simple fact of the matter is, if the people that voted for Ronald Reagan in 1980, and he won in a huge landslide against Jimmy Carter, I think he won 45 states, and Jimmy Carter won 5. if those people would have properly educated, trained, and discipled their own children, we would have about a 75% majority right now and could get anyone we wanted into office at any level, period. We wouldn't have to even worry about, well, what if the other side doesn't like it? It wouldn't matter. But what happened? We let them capture the hearts and minds of our children and grandchildren. And so then by 2008, they had the majority. And were able to put someone who even before the election was talking radical Marxist ideas. It wasn't like this all popped in on us afterward. He was talking about the concepts of shared prosperity and talking about the collective instead of the individual. America is based on the individual because our founding fathers knew the individual is what always gets abused when things go bad. If you start dealing in terms of the collective, guess what? Once that collective is over 50%, that means even the 49% is in a minority, and then they're in danger. They're in danger of this 51% abusing them one way or another. We're going to get the rights are to the individuals. The protection is for the individuals. The collective, it doesn't matter. The collective will take care of itself. If you're taking care of every individual, the collective will take care of itself. But he was talking those things as they're talking more and more of those things every day that goes by. And guess what? Most people 35, 40 and under are buying into it because they've been through our colleges and universities. They've been through our K through 12 public school system. They've been indoctrinated with this. And they've bought into these ideas. And what are these ideas? These are ideas straight from Karl Marx. They don't call them communism anymore because that's not popular because there's some bad little stigma things that got attached to that from the 20th century. But it's the exact same thing. Now they call them the progressive movement, the progressive ideas. But they're buying into these things. And we know from the 20th century what happens every time these ideas are accepted throughout a culture, and in turn, God is removed from a culture. Every single time the same thing happens. We don't have to guess and wonder, I wonder what will happen. Will it really get that bad? Will it? Of course it will. Because man is naturally evil. And power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Period. We know that from the Bible. We all have a sin nature. But of course, they try to ignore that and act like we're all naturally good, and they can create this utopia on earth. But, of course, we know that is not possible. How have they been doing this? Saul Alinsky, most of you have probably heard of him. He was a disciple of Antonio Gramsci, who really was the first one to really lay out the plan of how to infiltrate the institutions of a culture and use those to change the people from within. And what has really been going on, because we look and go, how have they gone so far, even from the 1960s till now? I mean, it seems to always be going in their direction, never even accidentally in our direction, even one time. And as I was reading Saul Alinsky and Antonio Gramsci, I realized what it was. Saul Alinsky says this. He said, change comes from the conflict. Change comes from the conflict. And what that means is this. It's really from Hegel, who was one of the kind of mentors of Karl Marx, somebody he really looked to for his ideas and philosophies. But this is what it is, and this is what they do to us every time. And we can pick any example we want, but I'll just pick limited government. Say our idea is limited government. We believe in a constitutional limited republic, a limited government. So they'll pick the opposite idea. Whatever our idea is, they just pick the opposite. Big totalitarian government. And then the change comes from the conflict. They start pounding us with their radical ideas. And they keep pounding and pounding. No, we need big government. It should be taking care. It should be giving us jobs. It should be, paying for our children all to go to college. It should be doing all these radical ideas. They keep pounding until the point we say, hey, enough's enough. It's ridiculous. We don't want that. So what do? They just take a little step back. Sorry, you're right. We need to compromise. Let's compromise. We shouldn't be asking for all that stuff. Let's just have them pay for the college education. And we're the nice guy that always, when the compromise comes, we go, okay, well, at least we're just getting that. We're not getting all that other stuff they were wanting to. But 12 months goes by, Bam! So we had the ideas here, we compromised, so now here's our starting place. We've gone this far. Well, they pull back farther than they were before and start pounding. And it happens again. And it happens again. And it happens again. It's been happening for 50 years. And that's why through gradualism, just one small step at a time, our country is a completely different world than it was 50 years ago. And that's how they've done it. Because they're always pounding away at it. And we, too tired of arguing with them, too tired of dealing with it, too busy playing golf or doing what we want to do. And so we allow them just to keep taking bigger steps and bigger steps and bigger steps. And again, it's always going in their direction. It's never even accidentally come back our way. Where does all this end? I think the best way to find where this ends, if we are not, with God's help, able to turn this back around. George Bernard Shaw, how many of you have heard of him? George Bernard Shaw, of course, was one of the founding members of the Fabian Socialist Society, and just a leader in the socialist movement for about 50 years. And when he was asked, what is socialism? This is what he said. This is his definition, and I think it's a great one. He said, socialism means equality of income or nothing. Under socialism, you would not be allowed to be poor. You would be forcibly fed, clothed, lodged, taught, and employed, whether you like it or not. If it were discovered that you had not character enough to be worth all this trouble, you might possibly be executed in a kindly manner. But while you were permitted to live, you would have to live well. I mean, think about all that is in that statement right there. You would be forcibly fed. They're going to decide what you're eating. And we see that now. Some of that stuff is starting to come out now already. They're saying, no, we can't allow you to eat what you want because you're going to be overweight or unhealthy or whatever, so we can't even allow you to do that. Clothed. They're going to pick your clothes for you. Lodged, taught, employed, whether you like it or not. And if not, we'll execute you. He said that back in the 40s. And we're so much further down the road than that. Do you know there was a survey done just a couple years ago in Belgium, and they're further down the road than we are in the socialist aspects. It was a survey of their nurses. 50% of their nurses admitted to having administered lethal drugs to their patients without their knowledge. 50% of the nurses in Belgium said they had murdered their own patients. They admitted it in a survey because we didn't have the money to take care of them. They were real sick, and we didn't want to mess with it, so we just gave them something that just killed them off peacefully and without pain. That sounds crazy to us that believe man is made in the image of God. And all life has value. It doesn't matter if you're 99 years old or if you're 9 minutes old or 9 minutes after conception. It is made in the image of God, and it has eternal value because of that. Well, that's not the way they think. And that's why I think many of us in this room, if things continue down the road they are, will not die of natural causes. I truly believe that. You know why? Because like Margaret Thatcher said, you always run out of spending other people's money. You have to. When you start to create a socialist society, you simply run out of money because the lack of motivation there, how pathetic just the diligence and the hard work it becomes so lowered down, you have to. Because you just simply don't have the money. And here's the problem. In the moral relativistic society they've created, with the people, the generations 40 and under, it's not a big tough choice for them. I'm sorry to tell you that. When they are presented, I think right now, if you had a survey in America of 40-year-olds and under, and ask them this question: if funds get so tight with health care, and we have to make hard decisions, would you have a problem making this decision? We've got a 60-year-old with cancer and a 5-year-old with cancer. We do not have money to help both of them. We just simply don't. We'd love to, but we just can't do it. Healthcare has become so expensive, and we just don't have the funds. We don't have the money. Who should get the treatment? Don't kid yourself, some of you that are 60 and over. It's to the 5-year-old. And this modern generation, because of moral relativism, that won't even be a tough choice for them. It won't be like, oh, I hate to do that. They're like, well, the 60-year-old, they've already lived their whole life. They're just a burden on society now. Their very existence, their breathing is destroying the planet. They're wasting our resources. They're absolutely. Just put them to sleep kindly. Don't torture them or anything, but just give them some painkillers and let them die off. But that it sounds humorous to us and crazy because from where we're coming from. But this is getting ready to start happening across Europe. You watch. Over the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to start happening at a level that is mind-boggling because it has to. They are out of money. And because they have not accepted God's blessing of children, their younger populations are so small, they've got between 6 and 10 elderly people for every one working person. You couldn't tax the younger person 100% and have the money you need. They will not have it. They will have to start euthanasia, a scale of euthanasia like Hitler would have done. I think they'll pick an age, 60, and you have to be euthanized at 60, whether you're healthy or not. We don't have the funds anymore. And again, they're further down the road than we are for them. That is no problem at all. That culture over there would vote for that today in an election and would accept it. Yep, on your 60th birthday, they put you to sleep. And they would vote for that in Greece and some of those countries. That is how far down the road they are from our Judeo-Christian foundations that we have here in America. But that's why this is so important, though, because this is where it's heading. And we've got to stand up now because we still have the freedoms here to do that. But it's hard to tell how much longer we're going to. I think one of the main tools they're going to use to try to finish us off, and I'm Lord willing, I'm going to be making Agenda 2 on this, is Agenda 21. How many of you ever heard of that? Some of you. What Agenda 21 is, and it sounds like some crazy conspiracy thing. It's not. It's right on the United Nations website. They've changed the name now because that wasn't too palatable. Agenda 21 sounded too ominous. It's called Sustainable Development or Smart Growth. Most counties in America have already signed on to it. 170 countries throughout the world have already signed on to it. So yeah, we want to be part of Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. And what this is the tool I believe they're going to use to finally take private property. They haven't made a lot of ground in that area. They've destroyed our culture. We've become morally bankrupt. Our families are falling apart. Our churches are falling apart. Everything is. But most people in America still believe in private property, Democrats or Republicans. They like having their home to go home to, and they like their little bit of space. Well, back in the 70s, these radicals of the left realized, you know what, we're not making the progress we need to on Karl Marx's number one goal. His number one goal, when asked, what is communism, he said, summarize it in one sentence, it's the abolition of private property. That was the whole thing to him. You've got to take the property because then there's nowhere to hide. If they have the private property, you're always trespassing. And so it gives them total control immediately. And they have control of all the food then because they have all the property, so they have control of the food. Well, they realized they weren't making any progress. So in the early 70s, they started to realize, you know what, this environmental movement has to become our tool to take that. And they tried many different things, but finally in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit, they wrote up the paper and the Earth Charter and Agenda 21. And just briefly to go in this, I just want you to know about it because you need to be fighting it in your local communities because it's already here. It's not something that's coming. You'll probably go down and ask city council, whatever, and you'll find they've already signed on to a lot of these things as under the guise of sustainable development. And they're selling it in a smart way. They're selling it, hey, we're going to give you a lot more bike paths and walking trails and beautification. We'll give you money to beautify your communities. But the reason they want to do that is they want everyone to move into the cities to live in those communities so they can walk to work and they can walk to the grocery store and back. They won't need automobiles. And one of the first things that's mentioned on the UN website of the things they list, here's the things we believe are not sustainable. Okay? And again, 170 countries have already signed on to this. And good old George Bush Sr. was one of the very first ones to sign on this. His last year as president, 1992. Oh, that sounds great. Let's do that. And one of the first things on the list is single-family homes. You cannot be allowed to continue. You cannot have single-family homes. Everyone has to live in multifamily dwellings in the city so we're not destroying the environment. They have a map on their website. And it has about 50%. In America, you can see this completely off limits to all mankind. Period. Cannot be used for anything. And then about another 30% that's limited human access. And then the rest, you can look where the dots they plan on having the populations. It's very few places in the entire country they're going to allow population to be at all. It's crazy. But they're blowing it through. People are buying it. This younger generation's buying into it. They believe there is a catastrophe coming that is so great that we have to do whatever we have to do or we're all going to die. And so they're buying. We don't buy into this because it's a lie, but they are. And here's a couple of key points that I think will help you understand that movement, the environmental movement, but also the left in general. And this is very important. Hitler once said, he said, if you want people to believe your lies, they have to be big. They will not believe little lies, but they will believe big lies. I started to think about that when I read that and started looking through the agenda of the left. And everything is a big lie. It's not like a little just slight slant on the truth. It is a complete opposite of the truth. I mean, just for instance, on the environmental movement, what have they taught us and scared us into believing? Warming is bad. The planet warming is a disaster. You need to be scared of that. Do you know what the reality is? If there was anything we could do, create factories that were just pumping out carbon emissions that weren't even producing anything, if we could even create enough carbon and that would warm the planet, which we cannot. Our percentage is less than 0.1% of man-made. It's all from God, the oceans, the way God created the cycles, the evaporation off the oceans and everything else. We don't have time to get into that. But we produce nothing. But if we could, we would want to do it. If we could raise the Earth's temperature a degree or two, it would be the greatest thing that could ever happen. We would have an abundance of food like you could not believe. The growing seasons would be extended. You'd be able to grow further north, and the hunger problems of the world would be instantly over. We would be living in like they were about 1,500 years ago. There was a warming trend, and they had just more. That's when Greenland was named Greenland. Do you understand? Under the 50 feet of ice on Greenland today, there's vineyards, there's wine presses they're finding as they dig down. That used to be a beautiful tropical place, not tropical, but warm enough where you could grow vines and have crops and people could live off of. And now it's 50 feet of ice. So the Earth has been much warmer than it is today many times in the past. It's always changing, the weather cycles. But it's the exact opposite. And do you also know, they talk about this warming taking place. Do you know how much the temperature has risen on Earth in the last 75 years? 0. Not even 1/10 of 1 degree in the last 75 years. It's a total lie. Not even 1/10 of a degree. And they have us all in a panic. We're all going to die. The whole thing's going to fall apart because of global warming. Even though global warming is, what we should be fearing is global cooling. That is a disaster. And we've had that at times in world history too, where it gets colder and then the growing seasons are shorter. And there's big consequences to that worldwide, especially for the poor. They suffer the most when there's lack of food because those that have the means keep the food then and they're not selling it out. And the poor people of the world suffer dramatically when we have cooling. Another thing about, CO2 is the enemy. Do you know this? Of course you know from your basic classes that you had, that's what the plants, live off of, so they can produce the oxygen so we have something to breathe as well. But I didn't realize this until recently when I was studying this. It's not just that. It's not like, well, they just need enough CO2. It's literally the more CO2 they have, they flourish like a weed. A big oak tree will grow to maturity in about 30 years instead of 50 years with extra CO2 in the system. It helps crops. Do you know this? If we could get CO2 to double in the atmosphere, if we could do that, if we could get it to double, crop production goes up 35%. The same ground, you have a 100-acre plot right now, you get 100 acres worth of wheat off it or whatever. If you could double the CO2, you get 135 acres worth of wheat off that 100 acres. God designed this planet for lots of people and to have plenty and to populate, like he said, be fruitful and multiply and cover the earth. And it's designed for that. Look at our big disaster, the oil spill in the Gulf. Oh, we're all going to die. The whole planet's going to die because of that. That was an unfortunate thing. It's too bad. No one wanted that to happen. My parents live on the Gulf. And they said it is cleaner today than it has ever been. God has decided, they don't know where the oil went. Of course, you don't hear that in the news. They said they literally do not know. It looks like, it appears to be that there's enzymes in the water that God created that multiply, and they flourish when there's something there for them to be eating like oil, and they just devour it, and it's gone. They said it's cleaner than it's ever been. They can't believe it. And it didn't take that long after the spill. About 9 or 10 months after the spill, it just started to, all of a sudden, wow, the water's even cleaner than it normally is. But again, they don't want us to know about that stuff. The last lie they've pushed toward us is overpopulation. We're running out of resources. We cannot sustain any longer. Do you understand that? And that's what Agenda 21 is all about. That's what most of the men of the world, the George Soroses, the Bill Gates, Ted Turners, Warren Buffett's, all of them are behind this movement to cut the Earth's population below 1 billion. That's what they say in their own words. To cut the Earth's population below 1 billion. Well, we have 7 billion today. So that means we need to somehow get rid of 6 billion people. That's scary when you have the wealthiest men and the most powerful organization in the world talking like that. That's very scary. Because you know what they're capable of. When they believe in the Darwinian evolution, that man is simply an evolved animal, you realize they're capable of doing anything to get down to that number if they choose to do that. Because man to them is just another animal, like killing off a squirrel that's causing problems or whatever else. They don't have a problem with that. So, but I'm going to tell you the facts of this. Like so many things, it's the exact opposite of the truth. Do you know what's really getting ready to happen here for the next 20 and 30 years? We're getting ready to have declining populations worldwide because we have not accepted God's blessing of children. And it is going to be devastating. Adam Smith, a great economist, once said, he said, you cannot have a prospering economy with declining populations. It is impossible. And we're going to hit about 8.5 billion people. So you say, wait a minute, well, we're going to go up from 7 to 8.5? Not because more kids are being born. It's because the old people are living longer. Because modern medicine has allowed us to live a lot longer than we have in the past. And that's why, like I said, that last scenario is going to be happening more and more to the euthanasia. Because as we start to get more and more and more older people, they have got to eliminate them. They simply cannot allow them to be around sucking the resources out. And you couldn't tax people enough to take care of Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security and all the other things. But there's over 70 countries in the world right now that are dying off. 70 countries that are not reproducing. You have to produce at least 2.1 children per couple to just stay stagnant. And there's 70 countries throughout the world that are way below 2.1. The Soviet Union alone, or Russia, former Soviet Union, 700,000 people are dying a year there that are not being replaced. It's gotten so bad their government will pay any woman full working wages to stay home and have children. But none of them are doing it. You know why? Because of our Western influence of our TV. Our TV programs are over there and they say, a woman shouldn't be home with the kids. They should be out working and being fulfilled. And so our TV has had devastating consequences worldwide. But it just goes on and on. Let me end with this. Chesterton once said, he said, emptiness doesn't come from being weary of pain. Emptiness comes from being weary of pleasure. And I think that is exactly where America is today. We have been entertaining ourselves to death for decades. I think we have taught our children and our grandchildren the whole point of life is making money and having fun. Even though when we look at Hollywood, the people that make lots of money, they're beautiful people, they have fame, they have everything we would ever want. You look at them and there's not a day that goes by in the news and what happens? They're in and out of rehabs, their marriage is falling apart. They cannot make it through one single day without pills or something to drink. Their life is so meaningless, so empty. And yet they have everything we're telling our kids, if you get that, you'll be happy in life. They have the American dream. Now, the left has been able to capture the hearts and minds of our children because we have allowed the schools to teach them that there is no point to their existence. Life is pretty meaningless and hopeless, and they're simply a highly evolved animal. And if you believe that long enough, like they do, and the suicide statistics show that that is true, they're skyrocketing. When someone comes along to you and says, hey, and the left is so good at packaging their causes, hey, we're saving the planet, do you want to join us? What do you think their reaction is going to be? Yeah, I want to have some point to life. I want to have some meaning. And that's why they're out there. They're not out there. If you go to any Occupy Wall Street movement, you go to any environmental rally, and I've gone to many, and you ask them, hey, what are you out here for? What are you saving the planet over? Very quickly you learn something. It wasn't facts that led them there. They know nothing about the movement. They knew nothing about why they're out there. And I realized what led them out here is they wanted to have a purpose. They wanted to feel like they'd done something that day of some value because they've believed the lie they've been told life is meaningless. And so that's what's happened. And that's how they've captured them. And here's the funny thing that really convinced me of this. I would start to some of those, I'd ask them some questions. Well, what's the problem on the horizon? Oh, we're global warming. I'd say, oh, well, how much has it been warming? Oh, I don't know, but we're all going to die if we don't do something. Oh, okay. And how soon till we all die? Oh, I don't know, but they had no facts. But then when I sat there with a chart from the National Weather Association and the National Meteorological Society and said, did you see here, over the last 75 years, global temperatures have gone up 0. Do you see that's from them? What do you think their reaction would be? I thought it'd be, you're kidding. I can't believe I buy into this nonsense. I didn't know that. They told me, my professor told me, but you don't get any of that. Zip. And I've done it 100 times. This is what you get. Get away from me. Get away from me. Literally putting their fingers to their ears. And that's when I realized this battle will not be won with facts. They could care less. It will be won by showing them there is purpose and meaning in life. They are made in the image of God. They have a purpose, and that is the only thing that will bring them to our side. We have the hope. We have the answers. We have to communicate it to this younger generation that is lost in the desert of useless philosophies that have destroyed their souls and their minds. They've been so dumbed down they can't even hardly have an argument or debate to understand these things. But I think if we show them the love of Jesus Christ and give them spoon-feed them truth a little at a time, and their eyes are open to the truth of the Bible and these issues, we can get them on our side. And when they come on our side, they will be the best warriors we could possibly have, because they will have already seen the lies of the other side. They will know what they were taught was a total lie, and you just taught to them to use them as a tool to further an agenda that wants to enslave them and their children. Anyway, I appreciate you being there, because being here and being involved, you're only responsible for your circle of influence. Don't get discouraged. God's still on the throne. He's the King of Kings. But you are responsible for your circle of influence.
It seems to me that this whole left-wing movement had to have some financial backing. And where did all that financial backing come from? Did the Federal Reserve have anything to do with it, or what?
Yeah, well, the financing has come, I think, through the banks, through the big business, the corrupt big business. There is a lot of corruption in big business in America. That's part of the Occupy Wall Street, what most of them don't understand. There is a little legitimacy to their cause. They don't know it, though. That's not why they're there, because I tried to talk to them about that, show them some of the usefulness, and they're just more interested in destroying everything that's government, whatever. But it's come through that. It's come through them very strategically and carefully working their way into almost all the nonprofit organizations in this country, into positions on the board and everything else that have the purse strings of the tremendous amount of funds that come into these organizations, where they can funnel those wherever they want. If you look, there's hundreds and hundreds of these nonprofit organizations that they get hundreds of millions of dollars of our tax dollars every year into the billions. They get money from all these foundations and charities. But the left has been wise in slowly working their ways into positions of power in those. So even though the organization might have a great sounding name, for the Bill of Rights, defending the Bill of Rights or whatever, you watch where that money goes, and it goes to the Acorns, and it goes to all these groups, and they just funnel it there. Or all their candidates. When they run for office, they get a radical running for office, they have endless money because it's coming from those. And also, to be quite frankly, a lot of the people like the George Soroses on their side, they're willing to spend their money for the cause. I mean, he himself even said, I'm going to spend every penny before I die on the cause of his billions of dollars. They will spend it. And our side sometimes is we're not as generous as we should be. We're tight, and we're not willing to make the sacrifices that we need to. And so then our candidates running, they hardly have any money. And they're running against the other people that have all these PACs and all these liberal organizations pumping them the money, so they win. But it's a lot of different, the big families. It's a whole study in all the places that have really been influential in pushing this forward.
I won't talk loud enough, I think, so I probably won't need a microphone. I just have, real quick, one comment. That is, I teach college, and I've shown your movie to my students, and it's unbelievable the faces that they have after they see the movie. And these are between the ages of 18 and 40 that I have. They're Fort Knox. The other thing is, what feedback or negativity are you getting from the other side, to include some of your peers in Congress and these kinds of things, when it came to the movie itself?
Well, mainly a lot of the nasty feedback has been over the internet, that didn't bother me. I can just hit the delete button. But I'm thankful. We live out in the country in Idaho, so we're a little bit out, which I'm thankful for. When you have a bunch of kids, you're concerned about those things. But I mean, we're in a battle here, and there's going to be a cost to be paid, and I realize that, and I'm just praying that the Lord will protect us if that's His will. As far as standing up, when I was in the State House there in Idaho and wrote the letter to the editor the movie talks about, I had zero support. Even though we have an 85% majority, supermajority in the House of Republicans in the House, the Senate, and the governor. And I wrote a letter that's just straight down the line of things most of them would agree with. Oh yeah, I believe it. But because it stirred up in the media, they were so scared to death of their own shadow, they were scared to walk to lunch with me. I mean, for weeks, they disappear out of the Capitol buildings. Like, it was just funny almost. I felt like I was in junior high again or something. But so no, I think that's one of our main problems across the country. The type of person that is in office today is just the wrong person to begin with. It has, over the last 30, 40 years, attracted someone that loves the title so much, they don't want to lose that little name tag. And so even though they might believe the right things and know how to say the right things, they will not stand up for the right things if there's any opposition against them. And so guess what happens? They're always compromising everything. And that's what's happened. And so it's been, it was a wake-up call for me, even in Idaho, which were one of the most conservative states in the nation. But even there, the rhinos are in the majority, and so it's still hard to get anything through there, even though you have an 85% majority. But it's sad.
One thing is, like, in my life, I felt this kind of calling, and, kind of seen the devil at work. And, you talked about a little bit about how the communist and liberal and socialist agenda kind of pervades all manners of life. We deal a lot with, like, the political side of things, but it's also, they know that, war is on all fronts. And so it's not just a political thing, it's a religious thing, it's a moral thing, a spiritual thing. And, I'm kind of doing, what you said, just do your spirit influence. I've got like a political show and I've got a religious show. And one thing I find is that the thing that's really just kind of scary and hard is that you get only so many people to only get half the message. You know, it's like you hear people who want to talk about the politics of the situation, but they don't want to talk about the spirituality.
Yeah.
You see a lot of people who want to talk about the religious aspect of the situation, but they don't want to talk about the political side of it. And so what happens is that you see this big divide and conquer thing. What are some things that you kind of deal with as far as like how you try to overcome those things when it comes to the fact that, you know, that you feel divided and conquered, and you know, you just don't know how people are going to, you know, unite and actually kind of win the day.
Yeah, it's tough because we are the only ones that have separated the secular and the sacred. They haven't. Everything is about. If you read the Humanist Manifesto that came out in the 30s, and good old John Dewey, the father of our public education, he was one of the signers of that. That's at the very beginning of it. Several of their sentences they talk about we can no longer separate the secular and the sacred. We have to be moving forward in every aspect of life. Our ideas have to be pushed forward in everything. We can't keep this compartmentalized here and this compartmentalized here. And you read it and you go, man, if Christians just did what they talked about in the Humanist Manifesto in the 30s, we wouldn't have had any of these problems. We'd have been standing up. We would have realized our Christianity, I can't separate my Christianity from my politics. That's what it is. That's who I am. All beliefs are religious. Okay? I mean, what is being taught in our public schools is pure religion. Don't kid yourself. It's not like religion has been taken out of the public schools. Jesus Christ has been taken out of the public schools, and that's the only thing that has happened. The secular humanism that is taught there, even the Supreme Court said that is a religion. Humanism is a religion. And that's the only thing that is taught in our public schools today. So we have just cowered down because we're just scared of our own shadow and ashamed and don't want to be, getting the flack for standing up for what's right. But we have to. We're at the point now, it's, okay, enough Mr. Nice Guy. We got to stand up. We can still be kind in it, but we need to stand up for the truth boldly every time and say, I'm sorry. No, I disagree with you. And for these reasons, you were wrong. And when they get done whining and complaining, no, I'm sorry, you're still wrong. We're not doing that. Thanks anyway. And we need to be on the school board meetings. We need to be the city council. We need to do whatever we can. We need to be sharing the gospel with people we meet in the community. And you need to be living in a way when you share the gospel with them, they realize you have something to say because Jesus Christ has made a difference in your life. You're not the exact same as everybody else where they look at you and they go, your life is just as big a mess as mine. Jesus obviously hasn't done anything for you. Why would I listen to you about him? We have to be willing to live a holy life. That's not a popular word anymore in today's society. But that's who God is. And that means maybe we need to shut the TV off in there that has the garbage coming in that's influenced our children and our grandchildren. And the Hollywood movies, just because it's a wonderfully done and incredible movie, if the message is not consistent with the biblical principles of the Bible, it is garbage and it is poison of the highest degree. Especially the better done it is, the more poison it is. And so we just got to be making the sacrifices in every aspect of our life. This battle is not ending in any of our lifetimes. Don't kid yourself. They've been undermining us for 100 years. I feel with the Lord's help, if we are diligent, we can get it back in 40. But this is a battle. We have to take back over all the institutions of influence. We have to capture this younger generation. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to take sacrifice. But thank God right now it's still not asking us to sacrifice it all. Like all those boys that did sacrifice it all so we can sit here tonight. And I encourage you to remember that. That is so important. That's why we live in the greatest country ever, because God honored their sacrifice of shedding their blood for us to be here.
I thank you for your inspiring agenda and your message tonight. I was 15 years old when I first read that book, Naked Communists. I went to a parochial high school, pre-Vatican II, very conservative. In 1983, I got called to the jury duty, and it was a terrible homosexual rape of a child. As a result, with the help of Dr. Simon and a group of people here in Louisville, we started out with 5 board members and $5, and we closed down 38 of the 42 porn joints here in the city and got an organized pass on those filthy magazines and the grocery stores you talk about. But the greatest compliment was last year in July of 2011. Leo, which is a very vulgar magazine here in Louisville, paid our group a compliment. After 20 years, the United States Supreme Court upheld our new dancing and our other ordinances, and they're all moving across the river. Our ordinances were also models for the other 119 counties in the state of Kentucky. The problem I'm telling you now is that we have not put a credible football team on the field to defend our principles, our country, and our God. We need to get people off their seats, on their feet, and out in the street. As St. Paul directed, we would not be Christians today if he sat for 7 to 14 years in Tarsus doing his 10th thing. So you can light that one little candle, and when people tell me that they can't, I tell them what our group of 5 people, with the help of the Baptists, the Presbyterians, the Greek Orthodox, the Methodists, the traditional Catholics, and a few other groups, the Church of Christ, we all got together on buses and we paraded. And Shelby, who was Mayor Abramson's secretary, told me personally that the mayor was more afraid of us than he was of the Board of Aldermen. So it can be done. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so very much. I'm kind of coming along late in the game. I've been saved now for 20 years, actually. It went by so fast. But nevertheless, I'm a black African-American Christian first. And everything that you're saying, I feel like I'm just in a wilderness when it comes to the people of God. The Lord has given me, I know, a mission in my heart, and I set out to go even during the election of the last 3 years ago. And I started off with, I thought that I would be embraced by the people of God, the church. And I found that that was not so. I went to some prominent black ministers in my various communities, and I was actually put out by several of them by just stating, that I went to tell them about Dr. Simon and to tell them everything that I was learning. I was excited and anxious. I'm not as articulate as some, but I'm saved by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and he knows everything I need to say and what's in my heart. But I'm so burdened by the fact that, and I don't like to put the spin on the black Christian or the white Christian, but I am a black American, and I go to my fellow Christians in the neighborhood, and I find that my heart grieves for them because they have, I don't know, the pastors, I don't know what it is they don't understand. They have the word of God, as does everyone, and it seems as though they have bought into this lie, and I feel like I'm just like a little David amongst these Goliaths in the religious community. Yeah. And I don't know what else to do. I'm praying and I'm attending everything that I can, but I just, I can't, it grieves me because I go back to the services and I just don't feel like I fit in, because now I know behind closed doors what the pastor thinks. I went to a pastor and he had this great big old statue of Obama in his office, and I went to take him some literature so I could pass out at the church and everything, and I was put out. Yes. I was told, I was put out, and I don't know, I need help with someone to train me, teach me the right way to say the things, and maybe I'm not saying it right. I was overzealous, and all that, but and I'm getting a lot, but I just need someone to coach me, help me. I feel for the people in our communities. They have been blinded, and when the church, the body of Christ, the men of God, the pastors are not standing up, because I remember the scripture says, like priests, like people, and so before the people can stand up, the pastors have got to get involved. And I just pray that you pray with me how to go about helping to get this done. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate that, because it's tough. It's if you look at it, it's really not a good situation. In the 1960s, with the Civil Rights Movement, when the black community is finally getting to be treated like they should have been treated all along, it's like, I don't know, it's like the Democrats just said, okay, if they're going to have these rights, we realize we're not going to be able to overcome this movement. that's when LBJ started all the Great Society programs and stuff. And he was warned ahead of time. They were said, this will destroy the black families if you start these programs. And they did it anyway. And I don't think that was an accident. I don't. I think they knew these programs aren't going to work, but they're going to work at what we wanted to work at, and that's get an entire culture of people, group of people, voting for us from here on out because they're going to be dependent on us. And that's my opinion from what I've seen. But it breaks my heart because it's just so wrong, but it's hard to, and I know that lady that just spoke, it's hard for her to talk about that. And it's really hard when you're a white guy to talk about that because it comes across wrong every time, like, oh, you're against them, which we're not. But it's terrible if we could show somehow. But I think that's going to happen from in the community. It's going to have to come up with the people rising up and starting just one at a time to shed the light where they can see that all this program, all this stuff, it's not helping them at all. And even if they thought it was at one point, just look over the last 50 years. It's destroyed everything in its path, these programs. And so it is not a solution to the problem. And that's what makes me really mad about the left, because even if they started them with good intentions, which I don't think they did, but if they did, they should have learned by now, hey, that's not working. We got to do something different. It is destroying these families. But they're not changing course because they have the votes. And that, to me, shows where they're coming from.
Well, this business on global warming, God has given us something called scrubbers. These scrubbers are major. They're called rain. They're called snow. They're called heat. They're called cold. Natural scrubbers. How about wind? How about wind? How about day and night? These are natural scrubbers by the one who was the God of those of mankind that would listen. In the Bible, Titus 1:2 says, in hope of eternal life through God who cannot lie, promised before the world even began. Everyone in this room here was known by God before you were ever born. That's what that means. Sir, you've done a great job leading here. I want you to know, I would speak for a lot of these individuals here, that we're going to be praying for you.
Thank you.
We're going to pray for you.
Thank you.
And that you will continue doing what you're doing. You're doing such a great, great job.
Thank you.
Let's give him a big hand. You know, when he was talking about that song, it reminds us that the soldiers that died for our freedom. And it also reminded me that, you know, there was a God in heaven that helped those people back there when they took a stand for what was right, the soldiers and everybody. And that there was an all-seeing eye that saw what was going on and who took a stand. And there was an unseen hand that moved just like it did in the Revolutionary War. And that same God in heaven is still up there now. Amen. And he will see you when you take a stand for him. And he will lift you with his unseen hand. And he will take care of you just like he did our founding fathers. And I heard a song, it was a black singer. And he was singing about how did America get started with all the Indians and the starvation and no food and everything. He says, well, they did it with the Bible in their hand. And that was the refrain for the whole movie. They did it with the Bible in their hand. Let's have a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this service tonight, and bless the offering in Jesus' name.